Okay. Machiavelli wrote The Prince, pretty straightforward there. The Prince is, a political treatise that explains how to behave, how to take power. It uses observation, evidence of specific examples of how certain things worked out. And importantly, it suggests that leaders should not follow Christian morality, but that leaders have a responsibility to increase their own power, to protect their own people, and increasing one's own power does not always mean you can be nice, to put it simply, right? He suggests all sorts of subversive things that might be necessary in order to actually increase your power. Castiglione's Book of the Courtiers, similar to Machiavelli. It is not a political treatise, but it's a manners. It's a book about manners, about how one should behave, about what a virtuous person is like. And so similar to Machiavelli, it's secular in outlook, and it's also looking at real-world examples of how one should behave in different scenarios. A how-to guide for being a gentleman during the Renaissance. Lorenzo Valla, in his oration on the dignity of man, is a Renaissance humanist who in this oration describes, as the name implies, the dignity of man. And if you remember, we read it, it describes how man is able to know truth, and that God created man so that that man has God-like powers to know things, that we are not brute sort of forces, but we are in fact people that can achieve knowledge. So this focus on the abilities of individuals is a huge part of Renaissance humanism. The High Renaissance happens in the late 15th century, so the late 1400s into the early 1500s. During the High Renaissance, the center of the Renaissance moves to Rome, where the Pope begins to finance the construction of a new cathedral, St. Peter's Basilica. The Pope begins to bring artists there. So, for example, Michelangelo will paint the Sistine Chapel, or Raphael will paint frescoes in the Papal Palace. The High Renaissance comes to an end, and the Renaissance in Italy as a whole comes to an end with the sack of Rome. Remember, Machiavelli is describing foreign occupiers in Italy. These foreign occupiers are the armies of France and the armies of Spain. The French and Spain royal families competing for influence over Italy. And then the impact then is that these marauding armies come through, and the Spanish army sacks Rome in 1527. And many people flee, and much wealth is destroyed. And the Renaissance, many historians say that this is the end of this Italian Renaissance era. Now, that's not to say the Renaissance as a whole ends. It ends more or less in Italy. We'll be talking less about Italy as the center of culture or commerce. And part of the reason for that is because the exploration opens up the Atlantic, and we'll have new frontiers and new centers of commerce and new centers of wealth. But we don't see the Renaissance end, we see it spread. Renaissance ideas spread north, Renaissance ideas spread west. So they spread into Germany with the Northern Renaissance of Erasmus, Thomas More in England. And these Renaissance ideas and the cultural flourishing will spread over the next century to England, where we'll witness an English Renaissance during the Elizabethan era, a Renaissance that will deliver the great works of Shakespeare and Marlowe. We'll see a Spanish Renaissance, often called the Siglo del Oro, the Century of Gold, which will deliver us great Spanish painters like Murillo, like Zurbarán, and like I'm forgetting my big one. Later, much later. And also Spanish writers like Cervantes. who wrote Don Quixote. And so we'll see Renaissance ideas spreading. So even though we can say the Renaissance more or less ends, the Italian Renaissance ends, the impact of it is on a new way of thinking and a new outlook on the world.